Que la meditación de mi corazón y las palabras de mi boca sean aceptables en tus ojos, oh Señor, mi fuerza y mi redentor. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. There was a story about a group of teenagers that the thing they had in common was that they all had an incurable form of cancer. And they followed these teens, and then they published this story. And the fact that all of those kids are now dead makes the story even more compelling and powerful. Well, there was this one exchange between two of the teenagers. So this young woman says to one of the young guys, "What's the first thing you're going to do when you get to heaven?" And the young man says, "I'm going to ask God why he put me through all this trouble, and then I'm going to punch him in the nose." What I found compelling was that he was angry at God, but he didn't lose faith in God. I thought that was what was most compelling. All these kids were understandably upset at how life had turned out. All of us have had hard things to deal with in our lives. And haven't we been tempted to just chuck the whole thing and say, why believe in God? Now, if you had that choice, if you decided that you were going to do that, how would your life be different if you decided that Christianity was no longer fit for you? What would your life look like? Would it be different? Well, one thing, wouldn't be sitting in here. You'd have your morning. You might have a little bit more money because you wouldn't be giving it to the church. But is your life better because you are a Christian? Do things go better with Christ? Can we point to specific good Christian results? Let's look at today's gospel. And let's put the context. So Jesus has been to the Jordan, and it's kind of the beginning of his public ministry. It's kind of like his inauguration. He goes to the Jordan, he gets baptized. As he comes out of the water in this very dramatic moment, a spirit descends upon him, and there's this booming voice that says, "This is my beloved, my son, in whom I am well pleased." So that's a huge declaration that all assume was God's voice speaking to this person. So if God is saying, "Here's my son," that makes Jesus something set apart. So as soon as he's baptized, does he now lead this life of glory and all kinds of wonderful things? No, he gets driven by the Spirit. He gets driven into the wilderness. That's how he starts out. After this grand and glorious promise and proclamation from God that he is God's beloved son, in whom he was well pleased. He was not upset at Jesus. He was pleased with Jesus, and he gets driven out into the wilderness. Just when things are beginning to fall into place, you think, Jesus is starting his ministry. He's going to be, declaring God's kingdom in the, among the people and so forth. It's this momentous time that his followers who were beginning to cleave to him are saying, okay, this is the one we've been waiting for. He's been anointed, he's been declared, let's follow him. And he goes into the desert alone. Now this wilderness that Jesus went to, it was not like a camping trip. It wasn't like somewhere he went to get away to contemplate his baptism. This was a harsh land with no resources. He went into this place that was filled with danger, and aloneness and fear. And he is there being tempted by Satan, by the devil. And these aren't just any old temptations. This is more than about choosing right from wrong. What's going on in that exchange between the devil and Jesus is a confrontation, a test to reveal who Jesus really is. What is Jesus made of? It's a test engineered by no less than the Prince of Darkness, the ruler of organized evil. And again, Jesus is in this wilderness with no resources, nobody to call on to assist. Now, is this a one-time thing where he gets tested, and if he gets through it, then he's proven himself and that's it? There's no more tests? Well, how does that work out for you? After you've gone through one test, is that it? Do you never get burdened again? Do you never suffer through any other hardship or pain? It's one of those things about humanity. It's almost as if we get defined by our challenges and our pain and our struggles. Because this is where we get to see who we really are. This period in our lives when we're down and struggling, that's when our character comes out. That's when we find out what we're really made of, when we are in the midst of struggle and hardship. Now, most of you know that I come from a very large family in Texas. I always like to say 300 of my closest relatives live there. And because we have a very, very large family, there's always something going on. Something's always happening. I have a niece who's getting married next week, and I'm going to be there to do her wedding. There's another niece who's pregnant and maybe having a little bit of a struggle with her pregnancy, and then there's other uncles and aunts who aren't speaking to each other, and big family drama, big family. But for being a family of about 300, and I mean that literally, we really are about 300, we are really blessed. We haven't really, we've all gone through tragedy and so forth, but we, as a group, we've been a very blessed family. And of course, we've had our share of struggles. Now, my father is of the older part of the family. He's one of the oldest, and at this point, he is the eldest, which worries him a lot because he thinks his family is dying by age, and he's next. So he keeps saying that. I said, no, I don't think that's how it goes. But anyway, so he's of the eldest group, and so therefore his children, us, we're of the eldest cousins. And so then there's a whole slew of people that come after us. And so whatever happens in life tended to happen to us first because we're older. So a few years ago, well, long time now, my brother died. He was 37 years old. And he was a younger brother. He died of AIDS. And this is while I was in seminary in Austin, and he was living in Austin at the time. And so I was his primary caregiver. And my parents, because I had my son, my parents moved to Austin to take care of my son while I took care of my brother. And the seminary community kind of rallied around us and helped me, get through seminary and so forth. They cooked meals for us. They helped me with my studies and so forth, and just gave us a lot of moral support. But eventually my brother did die. In those days, people with AIDS didn't survive. You just died. And so he died. In that same year, my mother, who was the matriarch of the family, now mind you, my mother is not the blood relative in this part of the family. It's my father who's the blood relative of the family. But my mother was the matriarch. She's the one who held the family together, who, established the spiritual connections between this huge, vast family that we have. And as she did with our community, our neighborhood, our church. I mean, my mother was just one of those people. She was a pillar. And she died quite unexpectedly that same year. I think she died of a broken heart, really, because my brother was one of her, well, was her favorite. And but he was all our favorites. I mean, he had that kind of personality. He was very eccentric and very, yeah, he's hard to describe. But he was everybody's favorite. And so when he died, I don't know, something about my mother also died. And she had been sick, but you know, we weren't expecting her to just up and die, just like that. So in 1 year, we lose my brother, we lose my mother, who was no small thing for the whole family. And then, in that same time frame, we get news that my sister's youngest boy had testicular cancer. And we were reeling, we were still reeling from the death of my brother, my mother, and now here's this young boy who at the time I think was maybe, he might have been 17, 18 years old, something like that. And it was just like, how much can you take? You know, how much death and destruction can a family be visited on? But through that whole time, we were strengthened. We were united. We became stronger and closer to one another. And that's not because we're such wonderful people. You know, it's not that. It's just that we are a community. And we're a community of people who believe in God and believe in Jesus Christ. And it was that faith, that sense of unity and that sense of togetherness that pulled us through all of those very hard times. I mean, like the people in the seminary, they weren't related to me in any way, but they were my community, and so they supported me. They helped me get through seminary so that I graduated, you know, along with my class, and I didn't lose out on my studies, and my parents helped me take care of my son so that I could take care of my brother. And it was this whole thing of being together in this time of trouble. And that's what the Christian community does. That's why your life would be different if you weren't a part of this community. Because when you go through the struggles, you don't struggle alone. When Jesus was out in that desert, in that wilderness, even though physically he was alone, he was not alone because God was with him. God stayed with him, and Jesus knew it, had faith in that. And you'll notice that when the devil tempted him, he came back at him with God's promises, God's words. So the devil could not dissuade him. And also notice there's this little subtle dig in all of the devil's challenges to him, because he says, if you are the Son of God. So there's this subtle dig, like, are you really the Son of God? I mean, trying to sow seeds of doubt. But Jesus knows who he is. And Jesus is not dissuaded because he knows that he's the Son of God. He knows it. So he can withstand the assaults. That's what we have. That's what Jesus gives us, that knowledge, that promise, that we belong to God and we are not alone. But that doesn't mean that we don't struggle. It means that we're not alone in our struggle. And whatever struggle comes our way, no matter how often it comes our way, no matter how many times we have to go through the pain and the suffering, we're not alone. We have God, we have each other. You know, we have this powerful grace that God gives to all of us. Because when it gets hard, that's when our true character comes forth. Hans Kung, he's a famous Catholic theologian. He wrote these words: "Here we are at the very roots of the question of being human and being Christian. Coping with the negative side of life is the acid test of Christian faith. It's easy to be a Christian and believe in God when everything's going well, when everything's coming up roses. That's nothing. The real test is, where are you? Who are you when you're in the midst of struggle? When you're in the midst of suffering and pain? Who are you then? In our church, when babies are baptized, they're given a candle. And that candle is to be lit each year on the anniversary of their baptism. Those candles are a visual reminder to the child and to the family of who that child belongs to. Because at baptism, we claim we belong to God. So not only who are we, but whose are we? We are God's. Those children belong to Jesus. They're chosen. Jesus chose them, chose you, chose me. Chose us to be worthy to spend God's love on us. To be human is to be tested. That's life. Where there's exaltation, there is struggle. Where there's mountains, there's valleys. This is the rhythm of life. And it's that spiritual, the old Negro spiritual that tells it like it really is. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. God makes us promises, not guarantees. The promises are that we are not alone, that God's love will never fail, that in the midst of our sorrow and our despair, we will make it through. We will make it through and be strengthened by it. We're tested all the time. The struggle between good and evil, making choices, it happens to us all the time. But we have this power. The power that we have is God's Word. And it doesn't ensure faith, but it enables it. God enables our faith. His love makes it possible. Jesus had come with a mission that was far more important than just trying to get us to have the most of life. Jesus came, and his purpose is more than helping us to become successful. He had come to illustrate God's love, God's sacrificial love for us. He came to usher in a whole other way of seeing life. A life of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of fresh starts. So we live in a world of struggle and suffering and sin, and that's the way life really is. But we have Christ with us. And because we have God's Word carries this promise with it. So let God's grace be sufficient, because God's strength is made perfect when we're weakest. Amen.